There are people who spend half their lives trying to earn a place in their own home. They explain every decision, announce every effort, justify every change, hoping that at some point all that honesty will be rewarded with recognition. They give reasons, ask for understanding, repeat over and over why they do what they do, convinced that the more they explain themselves, the more they will be valued. But deep down, they carry a quiet wound, the feeling that no matter what they do, their family will always see them as the one who has to answer for everything, the one who is available for everyone, the one who never quite earns the respect that others receive without even asking. Have you ever wondered why the harder you try to be understood at home, the more invisible you become? The truth is uncomfortable, but it sets you free. Respect is not begged for with words, it is commanded through presence. Almost everyone believes they will be respected the day they learn to explain themselves better, defend themselves with stronger arguments, or prove their worth with evidence. And that is the mistake that keeps them trapped for years, because every unnecessary explanation is a crack through which authority escapes. The human mind does not respect the one who justifies himself. It respects the one who holds his place without needing to defend it. What is always available loses its value, and what is announced loses its weight before it even exists. The change you keep expecting from others will never be born from your complaints. It will be born the exact moment you stop asking permission to exist within your own family. In this video, we are going to walk through 8 silent moves that completely transform the respect you receive at home, without shouting, without speeches, without dramatic scenes. We will do it through Stoicism, that tradition of more than 2,000 years that taught men and women to stand firm within themselves when the outside world was determined to break them. And here we will apply it to something as intimate as the place you occupy among your own people. You will not need to change your family. You will learn to change yourself quietly until their perception naturally adjusts to your new way of being. Stay until the end, because the 8th point contains the highest paradox of this entire path, the one almost no one dares to name. And once you understand it, it gives back something you thought you had lost, the dignity of no longer having to beg for what should always have been yours. Before we begin, I want to invite you to explore the Stoic Library of Self-Respect. 5 books where I bring together Stoic tools to set boundaries, organize your mind, and live with greater respect for yourself. You can visit thestoicgarden.com or go to the link in the description. Now let's begin. There is a quiet way to lose respect within your family, and almost no one recognizes it because it looks like politeness, it looks like patience, it looks like wanting to avoid problems. It consists of explaining every move, justifying every decision, anticipating every complaint, and presenting your life as if you were standing before a family courtroom. You explain why you were late, why you cannot help, why you need to rest, why you made a decision, why this time you are not going to do what you always do. And while you think you are being clear, many times what you are really communicating is something else, that you still need emotional permission to take your own place. That is why this journey begins here with the first lesson. Stop explaining what you do and watch how they start looking at you differently. Inside a home, excessive explanations do not always create understanding. Sometimes they create permission. When someone discovers that all they have to do is question you for you to launch into a whole defensive speech, they begin to understand that your confidence still depends on their approval. And from that point on, even if they never say it, they measure you differently. They no longer hear your decision as a decision. They hear it as a negotiable proposal, as something they can push, bend, wear down, until you eventually soften it yourself so you do not make anyone too uncomfortable. It is a small dynamic at first, almost invisible, but over time it can become a form of obedience disguised as dialogue. This happens often in families where one person has gotten used to being the one who calms things down, the one who explains, the one who avoids tension, the one who puts words where others place demands. And of course, at first it seems noble. Because speaking calmly matters. Because clearing up misunderstandings can sometimes prevent unnecessary wounds. But there is a deep difference between communicating clearly and begging to be understood. The first comes from firmness. The second comes from fear. And when fear directs the way you speak, others sense it even if they cannot name it. They can smell it in your long explanations, in your need to please, in that urgency to prove you are not selfish, that you are not bad, that you are not failing. How convenient it is for others to always have you explaining your innocence. Stoicism understood the value of restrained speech very well. Epictetus taught that there is no need to explain philosophy, but to embody it through action and let your conduct be the argument. That idea has enormous power within family life. Because your home does not need another speech about your exhaustion, your worth, or your right to make decisions. It needs to see new behavior. It needs to encounter someone who no longer turns every decision into a defense. Someone who can say no without writing an emotional novel. Someone who can step away from a conversation without feeling defeated. Someone who does not rush in to repair other people's discomfort every time he dares to choose himself. Think about this honestly. How many times have you explained something that was already clear, simply because you could not tolerate someone being upset with you? How many times have you given too many reasons so no one would accuse you of being cold, distant, ungrateful, or changed? Family can be experts at pressing those buttons because they know your history, your guilt, your soft spots, your old ways of giving in. And if for years it worked to pressure you with a look, a sentence, or a tense silence, do not expect that dynamic to disappear because one day you delivered a brilliant argument. It does not change because of your explanation. It changes when you stop rewarding pressure with more of yourself. Stopping the explanations does not mean becoming harsh, mysterious, or arrogant. It means learning to tell the difference between when a word clarifies and when a word lowers you. Some phrases are enough. I can't do it. I'm not going today. I've made my decision. I'll think about it and let you know. Said without a warlike tone, without a scene, without apologizing for existing. And then comes the difficult part, holding the silence that follows. Because many times the problem is not saying less. The problem is enduring what happens after you say less. That empty space you used to rush to fill with excuses. That moment when the other person expects you to justify yourself again and you do not return. That is where the change begins. Not all at once, not with applause, not with a scene where everyone recognizes your new authority and serves you tea with renewed respect. Life is rarely that generous with theater, but something shifts. Someone notices they no longer get the same explanations from you. Someone senses that your words carry more weight because there are fewer of them. Someone begins to understand that your decisions no longer arrive at the table to be approved by everyone. And when a person stops narrating every step, his presence regains density. Once this is understood, the next movement does not happen on the tongue, but in the quietest place of all, inside you. Pay attention to this. There are people who want respect from their family, but inside they still see themselves as someone who must compensate, please, prove themselves, and apologize for setting limits. They want others to change the way they treat them, but they themselves still inhabit a weakened image of who they are. So they demand firmness while trembling inside. They ask for consideration while feeling guilty for needing it. They claim a place while doubting whether they have the right to occupy it. And it shows. Not always in what they say, but in what they allow, in what they tolerate, in how quickly they retreat when the first resistance appears. That is why we now enter the second principle of this journey. Harden your inner gaze before demanding any external change. Family usually responds less to your words than to the relationship you have with yourself. If you see yourself as someone who is a burden when asking for space, others will end up treating you like a burden. If you see yourself as someone who has to earn affection by being useful, others will get used to seeking your usefulness before your presence. If you see yourself as someone who cannot disappoint anyone, every disappointment from others will become a chain around your neck. Not because everyone is evil, but because family dynamics adjust very quickly to the place you accept occupying. And if that place is built on guilt, fear, or the need for approval, do not expect respect to magically bloom from that soil. Hardening your inner gaze does not mean becoming insensitive. It does not mean you stop loving, or turn the home into a battlefield, or see your family as enemies. It means something much deeper, to stop betraying yourself in secret in order to preserve a false peace. Because many times the family peace you defend is not peace. It is silence bought with your surrender. It is harmony maintained because you absorb what is uncomfortable. It is calm manufactured because you are always the one who gives in before the tension reveals what is really happening. And of course, afterward you wonder why they do not respect you the way you would like. Perhaps because they learned that your inner peace was always the first price you were willing to pay. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the happiness of your life depends on the quality of the thoughts you allow to live in your mind. He was not saying it as a pretty phrase to hang on a wall. He said it as someone who understood that governing the outer world begins with watching over the inner world. Applied to your family, this means that before you correct the way others see you, you have to correct the way you see yourself. If the idea still lives inside you that setting boundaries makes you bad, every boundary will be born weak. If you still believe that resting is selfish, every moment of rest will come with apologies. If you still think your value depends on how much you do for everyone, you will keep exhausting yourself to earn a respect that should never have to be purchased that way. The question worth asking is not why they do not change. That question can become a cage. The question is what part of you is still sustaining the version they learned to use. Do you still react to the same tone? Do you still run when the same urgency appears? Do you still over-explain when someone looks disappointed? That is where the real work is. Because as long as your interior remains bent, your exterior may look firm for a few minutes, but it will bend again when the pressure increases. Respect is not sustained by one strong sentence spoken one afternoon. It is sustained by a new identity repeated in small decisions. And yes, at first it will feel strange. It may even feel unfair, because you wish it were enough to say, "I want to be respected," for everyone to reorder themselves with maturity. How beautiful it would be if family always responded like a group of wise people gathered around a fire, humbly listening to every boundary you present. But in real life, when you change an old position, others usually test whether the change is serious. Not necessarily with open cruelty. Sometimes with jokes, with reproaches, with silences, with phrases like, "You're acting weird now. You weren't like this before. Now everything bothers you." And in that moment, it is revealed whether your new inner gaze has roots or whether it was only a passing burst of enthusiasm. Hardening your inner gaze means deciding that you will no longer see yourself through the eyes of those who benefited from your most available version. It is learning to disagree without feeling destroyed. It is allowing someone to be disappointed without rushing to rescue their emotional comfort. It is looking at yourself with a new kind of sobriety and saying, "I can love my family without obeying every expectation. I can be present without being always available. I can be good without continuing to be soft where life asked me to be firm." When that begins to settle inside you, what you do on the outside stops looking like an act. It becomes character. And once character begins to take up space, it is time to examine what you gave away for years without anyone having to ask. There is a kind of giving that goes unnoticed because it has become part of the normal functioning of the home. No one celebrates it. No one thanks you for it. No one mentions it, but everyone rests on it. You pick up what others leave lying around, solve what others postpone, smooth over tensions you did not create. Do favors before anyone asks. Carry other people's small responsibilities as if they were yours. And then you wonder why your presence carries so little weight. The answer hurts because it is simple. What is always available stops being seen as generosity and starts being treated like scenery. We have reached the third point of this journey. Withdraw your constant availability and the invisible favors no one asked for. Constant availability looks like love, but many times it ends up functioning as silent permission for others not to mature. When you are always there, when you can always do it, when you always respond, when you always fix things, the house learns a very comfortable lesson. Someone will take care of it, and that someone, curiously, is usually you. So others can make mistakes with less weight, forget with fewer consequences, put things off with less guilt, because somehow your energy becomes the cushion their carelessness falls onto. What a convenient coincidence that the most responsible person ends up carrying what everyone else would rather not look at. The problem is that many invisible favors were not requested, but they were accepted, and once they have been accepted many times, they become an expectation. You start doing something to help, then you do it to avoid conflict, then so everything keeps running. And in the end, no one remembers that it was ever your choice. It became your role, your position, your unsigned obligation. And when one day you decide not to do it, when one day you do not pick up, do not call, do not organize, do not remind, do not anticipate, the reaction that reveals everything appears irritation. Because they were not seeing your help as a gift. They were seeing it as part of the basic service of the home. Here it is useful to look without sentimentality. How many things do you do so others do not have to take responsibility? How many burdens do you carry simply because you know that if you do not intervene, there will be tension, disorder, or complaints? How many times have you confused keeping the peace with absorbing other people's immaturity? These questions are not meant to turn you cold, but to give you back clarity. Because a home where one person carries too much ends up educating everyone else into a dangerous comfort. No one learns the weight of his own life if there is always someone reducing that weight before he feels it. Withdrawing that availability does not require a dramatic scene. You do not need to gather the family, deliver a solemn speech, and announce that a new era begins today. Sometimes it is enough to stop anticipating, enough not to run, enough to allow a small consequence to reach the person it belongs to, enough to respond later, to say you cannot right now, to let each person remember, organize, pay, solve, think, ask, and feel uncomfortable. At first you will feel strange, even guilty, because for years you may have confused your value with your usefulness. But that guilt is not always a sign that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it is only the echo of an old habit losing strength. And there will be resistance, of course. Maybe they will look at you as if you have become selfish for no longer doing what no one acknowledged while you were doing it. That is one of the sharpest ironies of family life. While you give in silence, it seems normal. When you stop giving, it seems like aggression. But that reaction should not frighten you. It should inform you. It shows you where your help had become someone else's dependence. It shows you who respected your effort and who only respected your availability. It shows you which parts of the home worked through shared responsibility and which parts worked because you were carrying more than belonged to you. Withdrawing invisible favors does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop becoming the support system for adults who also have hands, memory, judgment, and obligations. It means returning to each person the real weight of their own life. And when you do that without reproach, without theater, without punishment, something changes in the air of the house. Your time stops being given away for free. Your energy stops being open like a door without a lock. Your presence begins to regain an edge. Now that we have seen how to withdraw what was quietly draining you, it is time to understand why not everything deserves a defense. Think about this. There are family arguments that seem to be about who is right, but in reality, they are about who manages to pull you out of your center. They begin with a criticism, a loaded phrase, an insinuation, a distorted memory of what happened, and suddenly you find yourself explaining, correcting, proving, bringing evidence, trying to make everyone understand your side. You think you are defending your dignity, but many times you are only handing your piece over to a conversation that was crooked from the start. That is why we now come to the fourth lesson on this path. Stop competing to be right and inhabit your position without defending it. Family has a special ability to turn small differences into personal judgments. It is not enough for you to say you cannot. Then someone interprets it as you no longer caring. It is not enough for you to set a boundary. Then someone suggests you have changed for the worse. It is not enough for you to make your own decision. Then come the comments about your character, your past, your mistakes, your supposed contradictions. And that is where the trap is activated. Because if you step in to correct every unfair interpretation, you go from living your position to asking for it to be accepted. And when you need everyone to accept your position in order to hold it, you are still not truly inhabiting it. Competing to be right wears you down because it forces you onto the ground of the person trying to drag you there. The other person throws out a sentence. You respond. The other person exaggerates. You soften the details. The other person accuses you. You justify yourself. The other person changes the subject. You chase after it. And in the end, even if you said true things, you finish exhausted, shaken, tense in your body, with the bitter feeling of having lost something no one can see. What a brilliant victory. You won 3 arguments and handed over all your calm in the process. Sometimes the need to have the last word is just another form of dependence. Dependence on being understood, dependence on being absolved, dependence on the other person admitting that you were not so wrong after all. Seneca, who observed the destructive power of anger with fierce clarity, warned that we often regret having spoken and rarely regret having remained wisely silent. That teaching fits perfectly here because not every response is strength. Some responses only prove that they can still govern you from the outside. The deepest firmness is not always shown by raising your voice. Sometimes it is shown by letting a provocation pass without picking it up. Sometimes it is shown by saying one brief sentence and remaining still. Sometimes it is shown by allowing someone to think badly of you without rushing to clean up your image, as if your life depended on that judgment. This does not mean you should allow open disrespect or stay silent in the face of any kind of abuse. It means you must learn to tell the difference between a necessary conversation and a provocation wrapped in family language. There are moments to clarify. Yes, there are moments to set a boundary with firm words, but there are also moments when continuing to speak only feeds the disorder. Do you really need to convince someone who has already decided to misunderstand you? Do you need to spend half an hour proving your intention to someone who uses your explanations as material to keep arguing? Sometimes a calm retreat teaches more than a perfect defense. To inhabit your position is to act from a decision already made, not from a hidden plea. It is being able to say, "I understand that you see it that way," without abandoning what you decided. It is being able to hear criticism without automatically turning it into an internal command. It is accepting that someone may get upset, exaggerate, play the victim, or throw out an unfair comment, and still you do not have to enter the dance. Because some people are not looking for clarity, they are looking for a reaction. And when you react, you give them exactly the stage they needed to feel powerful over you. Unspoken respect is not born when you win every argument. It is born when others begin to sense that it is no longer so easy to move you from your place, that your decisions do not depend on the volume of their displeasure, that your boundaries do not dissolve in the face of an accusation, that your calm is not weakness, but inner command. At first they may call it coldness, pride, or distance. That is normal. When someone loses access to your immediate reaction, they often call a defect what used to be their tool. But if you sustain that firmness without contempt, without theatrics, and without the need to humiliate anyone, your presence begins to carry a different kind of authority. Once this is seen, the next layer goes even deeper, to stop living with your eyes fixed on being approved by your own family. Before we continue, I want to ask you for something simple. If this message is speaking to something you have also lived, write in the comments, "I don't negotiate my respect," followed by the city you are watching this video from. I enjoy reading every comment and knowing where you are joining me from today. And if you want a more complete guide to setting boundaries and living with greater wisdom, the Stoic Library of Self-Respect is now available. You can find it by going to thestoicgarden.com. Now let's continue. There is a kind of obedience no one sees because it has no visible chains. They do not openly force you. They do not give you a direct order. They do not place a threat on the table, and yet you still make decisions thinking about how your mother, your father, your children, your siblings, your partner, or that part of the family that always seems to have a comment ready to measure your life, will take it. You change plans, soften decisions, hide desires, postpone moves, choose whatever causes the least discomfort, and then tell yourself you did it for peace. But sometimes that peace has another name, one harder to admit, the need for approval. And that brings us to the fifth truth of this journey. Deactivate the search for family approval as the invisible engine behind your decisions. Family may have been the first place where you learned to seek emotional permission to be yourself. As a child, maybe you needed them to look at you with pride, approve your achievements, validate your efforts. That was understandable. A child needs to belong. But the problem appears when, as an adult, you continue living as if every decision had to pass through that old emotional courtroom. Then you no longer choose only from reason, from experience, from conscience. You choose from a hidden question, what will they think of me if I do this? And that question, repeated for years, can govern an entire life without ever raising its voice. Some people believe they are free because no one forbids them from doing anything. But all you have to do is look at their decisions to see they are living trapped inside old expectations. They do not create distance because they fear seeming ungrateful. They do not say no because they fear being seen as selfish. They do not change direction because someone at home might be disappointed. They do not rest because they learned their value was in being useful. And of course afterward they feel tired, resentful, invisible, as if life had taken something from them. Life did not always take it. Sometimes they handed it over little by little in exchange for continuing to be accepted. Epictetus taught that whoever wants to improve must accept appearing ignorant or naive in matters that do not depend on him. In family life, This means accepting something more concrete and more uncomfortable. Perhaps you will have to seem different to those who benefited from your pleasing version. Perhaps someone will think you have become hard. Perhaps someone will say you are not like you used to be. Perhaps someone will interpret your freedom as rejection, and there you find out whether you are truly changing or whether you only wanted a transformation no one would question. How easy it would be to recover your dignity with the enthusiastic blessing of everyone who had grown used to watching you give in. The search for family approval is dangerous because it disguises itself as love. It tells you that you do not want to hurt anyone, that you do not want to break the harmony, that you do not want to be unfair. And there may be truth in that. But there may also be fear. Fear of being judged, fear of ending up alone, fear of affection being withdrawn, fear that your decision will reveal you are no longer willing to live as a useful piece in everyone else's balance. How many times have you called consideration what was really a surrender, slowly filling you with bitterness inside? How many times have you said, "It's fine," when in reality you had just abandoned yourself again? Deactivating that need does not mean despising your family's opinion. It means putting it in its proper place. Listening is not obeying. Loving is not submitting. Considering others is not allowing their emotions to direct your life. You can receive an opinion without turning it into law. You can withstand someone's disappointment without falling apart inside. You can make a wise decision even if someone close to you does not understand it. That is a maturity many never reach, because they are still waiting for their family to give them some kind of final permission to live with firmness. And that permission may never come, because for some people your firmness will feel like a loss of control. When you stop seeking approval, your decisions begin to carry a different weight. You no longer silently ask whether they will still love you after you choose. You no longer adjust your entire life to avoid comments. You no longer confuse someone else's discomfort with a sign that you did something wrong. You begin to live from a compass that is more internal, more sober, less dependent on your family's reaction. And although at first that may make others uncomfortable, it also forces them to meet a version of you that can no longer be moved so easily by guilt, reproach, or disappointment. Now that this invisible thread is beginning to be cut, one decisive step remains: to build a life that does not depend on the walls where you once looked for permission. Pay attention to this. A person who has no life of his own outside the family becomes far too exposed to what happens inside it. Every comment weighs more, every silence hurts more, every lack of recognition becomes enormous, because your entire emotional world is concentrated in the same circle that sometimes ignores you, uses you, or measures you according to how useful you are. Then the house stops being a place and becomes the absolute center of your worth. If they look at you well there, you can breathe. If they treat you coldly there, you collapse. That is why we now enter the sixth principle of this journey. Build a solid life outside the home and watch the effect it has behind closed doors. Many people want to be respected in their family, but they have abandoned every territory where they could remember who they are beyond that family role. They no longer cultivate their own friendships, their own projects, their own routines, their own learning, spaces where no one asks anything of them, and where their identity is not reduced to solving, caring, holding everything together, or being available. And when a person is left with no outside world, they begin to negotiate too much inside the only world they have left. They tolerate more out of fear of losing belonging. They explain more because they need to preserve their place. They give in more because they feel they have no other source of meaning. That dependence is felt even when it is never spoken. Building a life outside the home is not running away. It is not abandoning your people or becoming indifferent. It is recovering proportion. It is remembering that your existence is not exhausted by being a father, mother, child, sibling, partner, grandparent, or the person who always appears when someone needs something. There is a life that also belongs to you. A life with a body, time, interests, silence, friendships, walking, learning, working on something, serving in another way, reading, improving, organizing your days. And when that life becomes stronger, your family presence no longer sounds like need. It begins to sound like choice. That changes more than it seems. Marcus Aurelius wrote that soon you will have forgotten everything, and soon everyone will have forgotten you. So you must act rightly now without waiting for lasting reward. That phrase, brought into everyday life, reminds us of something many families prefer not to look at. You cannot spend your years waiting for others to give you back an identity. You cannot postpone your life until someone values you the way you wish they would. You cannot hand over your best days to the hope that someday in that house, everyone will understand what you are carrying inside. Perhaps they will understand. Perhaps they will not. But your task cannot remain suspended in that possibility. There is a curious effect when you begin to build outside. You stop being so fixated on every reaction inside. You no longer run to fill every empty space. You no longer accept any treatment just to feel included. You no longer make family recognition the main food of your spirit. And then, paradoxically, some people begin to look at you differently. Not because you demanded respect with a memorable speech, but because your life begins to send out a new signal. You are no longer waiting at anyone's emotional door. You have direction, you have occupation. You have a center that does not collapse every time someone at home becomes cold, demanding, or unfair. This may create discomfort. A family used to having you available may interpret your own life as distance. They may ask why you go out so much, why you are busy, why you no longer respond the same way, why you have plans now. As if it were a moral failure for an adult to have a schedule, interests and limits. What a great scandal, someone who after years of carrying everyone decides to reserve a few hours for himself. But do not be confused. That initial discomfort does not always mean you are doing harm. Sometimes it means the family system is discovering that it can no longer organize itself around your permanent self-sacrifice. A solid life outside the home also makes you less manipulable. When you have healthy bonds, routines, goals, spaces for growth, and a firmer relationship with yourself, reproaches lose part of their power. Not because they no longer hurt, but because they no longer define your entire world. You can love your family without being locked inside their judgment. You can take part without disappearing. You can stay close without becoming anyone's emotional property, and that inner freedom produces an authority that does not need to be announced. It shows in the way you walk, in the way you respond, in the way you choose, in the way you no longer seem available for every drama that used to swallow you whole. Building outside is deep down, giving oxygen back to what is inside. Because a person without a life of their own comes to family hungry for approval. A person with a life of their own comes with presence. And that difference is felt. You do not need to punish anyone or withdraw with resentment. You only need to stop living as if home were the only place where your worth could be confirmed. Once your world expands, the test that will define whether this change is real or only a brief attempt arrives, sustaining the discomfort your new version will provoke. When a person truly changes within a family, they rarely receive immediate applause. Usually the first thing they receive is resistance, suspicion, irony, reproach, or that strange look from those who feel that something has moved out of its usual place. Because your old version, even if it wore you down, was comfortable for everyone. They knew how to ask things of you, how to pressure you, how to make you feel guilty, how to pull explanations out of you, how to send you back into the same old role. But when you begin to speak less, to be less available, to hold your position more firmly and to build a life of your own, the family system becomes unsettled. We have reached the 7th step of this journey. Endure the discomfort your new version creates without taking a single step back. This is where many people lose everything they have gained. Not because they did not understand the lesson, but because they cannot tolerate the discomfort that appears when they stop acting the way they used to. They say they want respect, but as soon as someone gets upset, they start explaining again. They say they want boundaries, but as soon as someone becomes cold, they go back to pleasing. They say they want to reclaim their place, but as soon as their family calls them selfish, strange, or distant, they rush to prove they are still the same as always. And that is the problem. They want a new life without going through the initial rejection that every serious transformation brings. Family will often try to pull you back toward your previous version because that version was predictable to them. If before, a disappointed gesture was enough to make you give in, they will try that gesture again. If before, a hurtful phrase was enough to make you justify yourself, they will throw it at you again. If before, a cold silence was enough to make you seek reconciliation too soon, they will use that silence as bait. They will not always do it consciously, but the pattern will try to survive. Old dynamics do not surrender just because you had 1 week of clarity. They defend themselves, they adapt, They look for the crack through which they can get back in. Musonius Rufus taught that character is not formed in comfort, but in the deliberate practice of what we would rather avoid. And here that phrase carries a special weight. Because you would rather avoid the long face, the sarcastic comment, the accusation that you have changed, the tension at the table, the discomfort after saying no. You would rather everyone understand your process with nobility and calm. How nice that would be. But many times maturity arrives precisely when you are able to hold a correct decision, even when the atmosphere becomes uncomfortable. That is where character is formed. Not when everyone makes your change easy, but when you sustain it without asking permission to keep moving forward. Ask yourself coldly, how many times did you go backward, not because you were wrong, but because you could not bear other people's discomfort? How many times did you abandon a healthy boundary just to recover a little external calm? That is the most dangerous trap, because when you step back, you do not only lose that day's boundary. You teach others that your firmness can still be defeated if they apply enough pressure, and the next time, the pressure will come with more force, more precision, and less respect. Family learns quickly when a position is real and when it only needs to be pushed until it collapses. Enduring discomfort does not mean becoming indifferent to someone else's pain. It means not allowing every discomfort in others to automatically become an order to betray yourself. You can listen without obeying. You can love without stepping back. You can feel guilt without turning it into a decision. You can observe family tension without rushing to repair everything with your old availability. This is a decisive point. Guilt can appear even when you are doing the right thing. Fear can appear even when you are reclaiming dignity. Sadness can appear even when the change is necessary. Do not confuse an intense emotion with a sign that you are wrong. The first days, even the first weeks, are usually the hardest because you are still letting go of being someone everyone knew. Your new version does not yet have enough history. It has not yet proven that it came to stay. That is why you must repeat it through small actions, not huge speeches. Respond calmly. Do not over-explain. Do not run to fix everything. Do not enter every argument. Do not apologize for having a life. Little by little, those around you begin to understand that this was not a passing bad mood or a phase or an exaggerated reaction. It was a silent reconstruction. And when that reconstruction holds, respect stops being a request and begins to become a consequence. But there is still a higher understanding left. Everything changes when you no longer need that respect in order to be at peace. After this entire journey, it may seem that the goal was to finally get your family to look at you differently, value you more, speak to you with greater care, or recognize the weight of everything you have been carrying for years. And yes, that may happen. It is possible that firm silence, sustained boundaries, a life of your own, and the withdrawal of automatic availability change the way they perceive you. But there is a deeper paradox, and it is the one that separates fragile respect from true respect. We have reached the final lesson of this path. Understand that true respect arrives when you no longer need it to be at peace. As long as you desperately need to be respected, you will remain vulnerable to disrespect. Because any cold gesture will bring you down, any unfair comment will drag you into defending yourself, any indifference will make you doubt your worth. So even if you are trying to be firm, deep down you will still depend on their reaction. And that dependence seeps through. It shows in the anxiety with which you wait for results, in the way you watch to see whether they have changed yet, whether they now seek you out differently, whether they regret it, whether they finally understood. You are still looking outward to confirm something that should have settled within you. Here, Stoicism strikes with a clarity that is not always easy to accept. Epictetus taught that we should not make our peace depend on the world obeying our desires, but rather order our will so we can meet what happens with firmness. Applied to your family, this means your peace cannot depend on everyone waking up, maturing, thanking you, or behaving the way you expect. You can influence through your conduct, you can set boundaries, you can withdraw from excess, you can speak firmly when needed. But you cannot turn someone else's recognition into the foundation of your inner stability. If you do that, you are still leaving your soul in the hands of people who may not even govern their own. The hardest maturity is acting with dignity, even when no one applauds it. Stop explaining even when no one understands at first. Set boundaries, even when someone gets offended. Build a life of your own even when they call you distant. Step away from an argument even when they think they won. Do fewer invisible favors even when they look at you strangely. Because your work is not to manufacture a perfect reaction in others. Your work is to stop abandoning yourself in order to obtain a reaction. That change may look small from the outside, but inside, it reorganizes an entire life. And curiously, when you stop needing respect as emotional food, your presence becomes more worthy of respect. You no longer enter the house hungry for approval. You no longer speak like someone trying to be absolved. You no longer help in order to buy affection. You no longer stay silent out of fear or speak out of desperation. Your gestures become cleaner. Your yes carries more weight because it no longer comes from obligation. Your no carries more weight because it no longer comes wrapped in excessive guilt. Your silence carries more weight because it is no longer full of resentment, but of inner command, and that, even if no one names it, can be felt. Some people may change with you. They may begin to treat you more carefully, to ask instead of demand, to notice your absence, to measure their words, to recognize that you are no longer the same available person you used to be. But others may not change as much as you would like, and you must look at that possibility without fear, because true freedom begins when your dignity is no longer suspended in another person's response. If they respect you, you will walk calmly. If they do not respect you, you will also know what to do. That is the difference between someone who begs for a place and someone who already occupies it. In the end, this path was never really about controlling your family. It was about regaining control of yourself within the family, about no longer explaining what does not need a defense, about looking at yourself with greater firmness, about withdrawing what was draining you, about not fighting for every point, about cutting the thread of approval, about building a life that does not depend on the home as its only source of worth. And when all of that comes together, something silent but definitive happens. You no longer seek respect like someone asking for emotional charity. You begin to live like someone who remembers that his dignity was not born the day others recognized it, and therefore it does not die the day someone decides to ignore it. If you have made it this far, you are not one of those people who only look for a comfortable phrase to feel better for a moment and then return to the same life as always. You have held a difficult truth, that many times the lack of respect at home does not begin with the bad attitude of others, but with the place one accepted occupying for far too long. Today you saw that over-explaining weakens you, that constant availability makes you invisible, that not every argument deserves your energy, that family approval can quietly direct entire decisions, and that a life of your own changes even the way they look at you inside the home. Now one decision remains, and no one can make it for you: to keep defending an exhausted version of yourself, or to begin living with a firmness that no longer asks permission to exist. But hearing this is not enough. The test will come when you return to that conversation, that request, that uncomfortable silence, that look that used to make you step back. That is where it will be revealed whether this was only a reflection or the beginning of a new behavior. If something you heard today reminded you of a wound, a relationship, or a pending decision, take it seriously. Sometimes one phrase opens your eyes, but it takes practice not to respond again from guilt, fear, or habit. That is why I wrote 5 books on practical Stoicism to accompany you in that inner work. You can learn more by going to thestoicgarden.com. And before we continue, I would like to read you. Tell me your country, your name if you want to share it, and what you were doing while listening to this reflection. I am Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden, a place for those who understand that the second half of life does not have to be a silent wait for recognition, but a stage of clarity, boundaries, and reconstruction. We are not here to hate the family or harden the heart, but to see more clearly, decide more wisely, and stop handing our dignity to those who became far too accustomed to our giving. Subscribe if you want to keep walking more firmly on this path, not to collect videos, but to train a different way of looking at your life, your relationships, and your peace. Share this video with someone you care about, who may be giving too much in silence and needs to hear a clear word right now. And stay close, because up next, 2 recommended videos will appear so you can keep going deeper into a life with more self-respect, more character, and more stoic wisdom.